What was once a dream is now alive, brimming with new energy, sailing to a new beat. 7 kilometers of blue, now bursting with fun, creating a splash, bringing new life to the community you call home. There is only one.
Good evening, namaste, and salam alaikum, distinguished guests and members of IBPC. It is indeed my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this evening's webinar on behalf of IBPC and Sheikh Foundation. And this is about matters of heart, how to be healthy and keep our heart in good shape, which is very critical for us. So, as we have guests, I would like to introduce IBPC and Sheikh Foundation. So, Indian Business and Professional Council is one of the largest business council in Dubai under the auspices of Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Its objective and intent is to organize events, collaborate, do networking between Indian and Emirati businessmen, both here and in India, thus furthering UAE and India business relationship. We welcome new members, both corporate and individual, from these two fraternities. Sheikh Foundation is a non-profit, non-commercial organization founded by Dr. Brajesh Mittal, who is also the Deputy Director of Medcare Hospital, Dubai, and consultant cardiologist. Sheikh is for saving heart attacks key efforts. It is there to prevent heart attacks, how to help people from preventing heart attacks, and also any damages, collateral damages from heart attacks. So that's what this organization is about. Today, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome a very inspiring personality amidst us who will be speaking in a little bit, Dr. Azad Mopin. Dr. Azad Mopin, he doesn't need a lot of introduction, but I will still take the privilege of speaking a little bit about him. He's the chairman of and managing director of Aster DM Healthcare Group. He is an inspiration far beyond. He's a winner he has been given a lot of awards, and if I start talking about that, it will take the whole evening. But few of them notable: Padma Shri by Government of India, Parvasi Bharatiya Samman, again in 2010, given by the President on behalf of Government of India, Arab Healthcare Award, and the Best Doctor Award by the Kerala government in 2009. These are just a few of the notable awards that he has got for his social and contribution and health contribution in healthcare field, both in UAE and India. Dr. Mopin is not only an inspiration for the current generation, but in my view, he's an inspiration for the generations to come, to learn from him, and how to move ahead from an individual to an entrepreneur to a philanthropist, and how to do good to society. His modesty and simplicity is next to none. His contribution efforts in India and UAE through Aster DM Healthcare Group during critical COVID times has been again second to none, and that everybody has seen, and he has really contributed. Other thing is, he is also the governing council member of Indian Business Council Board. So it's really my pleasure and honor, Dr. Mopin, to welcome you today's event. We'll take it in order to take this forward. Namaste. In order to take this forward, I would hand over to Dr. Mittal, Brajesh Mittal. But before that, just for the guests and members, at the end of the talks, once they are over, we have a Q&A tab, which during the session, or towards the end, you can put your questions and Dr. Mopin and Dr. Brajesh Mittal will put it to them to answer as it might be appropriate. So without much ado, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Brajesh Mittal to take the evening's proceedings forward. Dr. Mittal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sinha. And it is a real pleasure. I will use the word which is a bit emotional word is I am ecstatic to have our dear sir back with me. And I can't express my joy and honor that he has spared time. He is a very busy person, I know, because I work in the same organization, so I know how busy he is. So, sir, it is a real pleasure to have you once again. You are the patron of this Sheikh Society, which is an added pleasure. And your speech, people remember even now, the one which you gave on 25th January at the time of inauguration and launch of Sheikh. That was a very well thought of speech and very well circulated. So, sir, this is from my side that I have invited you to present a leader's perspective in the COVID era, because no other leader could be better equipped to tell us what happened in the COVID time and how the healthcare leaders took the challenge and taking the challenge at the moment also and carrying it forward. So with utmost respect, sir, please, I'm welcoming you to deliver your talk.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Dr. Mittal, and before that, Mr. Dilip Sinha, for that very generous introduction by Dr. Dilip Sinha, and I really appreciate. And so Dr. Mittal also mentioned about me and our personal connect. So it's my pleasure to address IBPC because I'm also on the board of IBPC, and also Sheikh because I am a patron of that also. So this is a very good program which is being taught by Dr. Mittal, and IBPC has been kind enough to give the opportunity for this to be transmitted to the members of IBPC. So let me first of all wish everyone all that is best, and most importantly, to keep healthy and safe during this difficult period on this special day. Today has got an importance because it's a World Heart Day, and it's very appropriate that this subject has been chosen by Dr. Mittal for the talk today. So I've been asked to give a perspective about COVID. From a healthcare leader, a perspective of a healthcare leader, which I will talk to you about maybe 7 to 8 minutes. And then, of course, Dr. Mittal will be taking you through the presentation on COVID and heart. So, Dr. Mittal, I have to just mention that he is one of the most astute cardiologists that I have seen. As a colleague, as well as his patient, in fact, he was looking after me also while I had some minor requirements and all. He is one among the most approachable and one of the best professionals that you can have in the area of not only cardiology as a doctor. So he is also very ingenious in developing such programs like, even the foundation, which is called Sheikh, the name itself, it is so nicely worded, as well as the ways in which he is trying to educate the public about the problems in healthcare, especially in cardiac area, which is his specialty. So thank you, and may God bless you. Now, coming back to COVID and a leader's perspective. So we all know that this is something which everybody is speaking about now. And I've recently been listening to somebody who said that he told me that there are 1 to 10 grades of people who are experts in COVID. Anybody who is on WhatsApp or any social media becomes an expert. So that is a level 1 or 2. To the experts who are sitting in WHO and people like that who are at 9 to 10. So anybody can be at any level because all of us are reading about it every day. There is no dearth of information about COVID. If you open the paper or if you go to the net, everywhere it is COVID. So we all know a lot about COVID, and I don't want to repeat about that because it's again, whatever we know, I am repeating and it will be boring to you. What I wanted to just tell is that this is now we are with COVID for 9 months, and what we have 8 months, and what we have learned is that we have to live with it. It is not that before COVID, we used to say BC and AC, after COVID, before COVID and after COVID. Now that whole thing is going, and we now know that it is something like a common cold where we will have to live with that. The influenza and all doesn't go away. You live with that, and that is how you have seen from your childhood onwards. But when COVID started, and this was in January when WHO said that there is a serious illness which is coming from China, Wuhan, and coming to other countries, we all thought that, okay, this is another thing which comes and goes. We heard about the SARS and many other things, and this also we thought that this is something which will just go away. But now we know that. On March 11th, WHO declared that this is going to be a pandemic, which is after 100 years. We had the last pandemic, Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. Exactly 100 years after that, we are seeing another pandemic happening in the world. And we know that 1 million people have already died, and we don't know. The projection is that another, God forbid, million will die, something like that. Even WHO came out something like that. So it's a very, very serious problem, even though we thought that it will just pass. But when you look at the illness as such, it is not something that serious. It happens, I mean, in 95% of the people, it doesn't go into a serious situation. And only in 5% it becomes something serious, critical. And of that, only a small percentage of people die. We treated 7,600 patients in our hospitals during this period in UAE. And of this 7,000 odd patients, the mortality rate was 0.86% only, just 0.86%. So we know that even though it is usually said to be 2%, 3%, or even up to 5%, the mortality in our country, India as well as in UAE, is much lower when compared to what is seen in some of the countries which we were earlier hearing. So it is a serious illness. The issue is that we don't have actually a vaccination or a treatment. Even if we had a treatment, leave alone vaccination, we know that for many of the illnesses, there are no vaccinations or immunization. If we had a treatment where immediately as somebody gets a treatment, for example, even in pneumonia, serious pneumonia, if you don't have antibiotics, the patient will die. But we have many antibiotics for the other bacterials and all. But here, unfortunately, we haven't found out the medicine, or we don't have a vaccine. That is a serious issue. So coming back to what has actually happened, when you look at various things, one leader's perspective, the most important thing was the limited resources which were available. And this is the most important thing which we were facing initially as leaders, because there was lack of even personal protective equipments, even gloves and things like that, for giving to the healthcare workers or to people who come into the hospital. So this was the most important. The crunch for materials and resources was one of the most important issues which we faced as we started this pandemic. Then we found that there is a huge dearth of people which is happening. There was a requirement for more people to be available, and there was a requirement for people to be protected. So when you look at this, it is like, you have to have the people ready and the healthcare workers ready. That's the most important thing. And how this is like, you travel on an airplane, and then you are told that before even taking care of your child, you have to take care of yourself, because then only you will be able to protect the child. So you have been told that take care of the child, and then, yourself, and then you can take care of the child. So it's a very important thing. Like that, healthcare workers who are in the epicenter of the illness and who have to be the frontline soldiers have to be protected. So as a healthcare leader, my responsibility or our team's responsibility was to make sure that the people who have to provide care to the patients have to be protected. So that became the most important challenge for us. One, resources. Second, the people. the people, from the very beginning, we were looking at how they can be protected and the ways in which, not only them, even their families, because they go back after coming to the hospital or clinic and they have to be protected. So utmost care, like providing them the necessary knowledge about it, as well as the equipments and whatever materials are required. That, I think, was the most important thing from the point of view of treatment. And we knew that prevention is much more important than treatment. Then as we went forward, we realized that this disease, we don't know it because this is the first time something like this is happening. We were told when it started that this comes like a cold and cough, and then it becomes a pneumonia, and that is how people are going to get affected. But we realized that it is not. It is something where it is entirely different sometimes. It comes in a different way. You may not even have a test positive. You will see that when you take a X-ray or a CT scan, you will find that there are findings suggestive of COVID, which we didn't know at that point of time what it is actually. And it was completely different from what has been told earlier. And it is in an evolving phase still. And you could have multi-system illnesses. It could affect, now Dr. Brijesh will tell about how it affects the heart. It will affect the kidneys. It can affect multi-system. It can be in your blood. It can produce coagulation. And it can have lot of things which were not earlier known. So the challenge was how to know about it, how to treat it. Treatment also was evolving. We were first told that you have to give chloroquine. Later it was contraindicated. We were then told that you have to look at other materials, other medicines like steroids, and later some of the medicines like remdesivir. And recently there have been other things also which came in. So the treatment also was evolving. As leaders, we were supposed to know that what is the best treatment and what are the ways in which a patient presents and how it can be controlled. Now, finally, I want to come to this point where there is also a requirement for the organizations to run. As a healthcare organization, sustainability is very important. It is important that the organization sustains. We have to have the wherewithal, including the money for supporting the people, because the patient numbers were coming down. We went down to 40% of our total, footfalls and revenues when April, May, the actual COVID hit first time. Of course, now it has come up and it is much better. So there is a requirement for leaders to look at sustainability of the organization. And that was one of the major challenges. I don't want to prolong. I just want to tell you that the important things that came, this is something which we are learning even now, is the requirement for the materials, the resources, the human resources, and also to look at how the disease is evolving and to make sure that sustainability is very important. So these are the important learnings as a healthcare leader that I have. And I'm sure that Dr. Mittal will go deeper into the cardiac related matters of COVID. And then we will have this session on QA where we will try to answer your queries. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. It is a very wonderful illustration, and you have set a good stage for me to take it forward. As a leader, I know the challenges, because that I can never understand. How could you manage as a leader with all through this 6 months with multiple challenges of revenue generation plus protection of the staff and taking care of the patients and liaising with the government authorities? It was a tough task. And I was also holding the chair of medical director at that time. So I additionally knew what were the challenges. So we commend your efforts, sir. And this was a very good presentation for everybody. And now I will go a little bit more into the cardiac side of it. So what we know about cardiovascular disease, the first thing is, because this term will continue repeatedly in the presentation. So what do you mean by cardiovascular disease? The diseases of heart and blood vessels, they are clustered into this single term of CVD, which primarily include heart attacks, with which all of us are aware of. Additionally, strokes, the diseases of the peripheral or limb arteries, the arteries of the arms and legs, are also included in cardiovascular disease. And then there are some other heart diseases which are not directly related to heart attacks, but they affect the muscles directly, or to the coverings of the heart, or the valves of the heart. In general, for most heart attacks and strokes and peripheral arterial disease, the cholesterol deposition is the common denominator. That is the starting point. Now, as per WHO figure, 17.9 million people die every year from cardiovascular diseases, and that constitutes 31% of all global deaths. And cardiovascular diseases are clearly the number one killer among all the given causes. Today being the World Heart Day 2020, and this year, World Heart Federation has put in the theme, use heart to beat heart diseases. And in the time of COVID-19, taking care of your heart is more important than ever before. And why is it so? Let's see some introductory part that what is actually COVID-19. COVID term stands for coronavirus disease of 2019. This term was coined by WHO, and they this time clearly avoided any geographical, political, national, religious, any such indication in the nomenclature of the disease. Like there was something before called MERS, Middle East syndrome, or something was called as swine flu. So these terms have been avoided carefully. Now, severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, this is the name of the virus. It's not necessary for you to remember this. This is a cluster of viruses under the term of coronavirus, and one of them is COVID virus, which is affecting us now. It is an RNA virus, and we know that it started first time in Wuhan, China in December 2019, and WHO declared it as a pandemic on 11th March 2020. As of now, there have been almost 3.4 million cases, if I am very precise, 34 million cases, if I am very precise. In Indian terms, it is 3.4 crores. And almost 1 hour before in the news, this term was completed to 1 million, which Dr. Moopen sir also said 1 million. So this is the official figure from WHO now at this point of time. This is not to be undermined. This is important, but again, look at the numbers and the ratio. The actual mortality is 0.5% only. It doesn't mean that we should allow 1 million people to die. That is not our meaning, but we are just showing the quantum and seriousness of the problem. And also look once again that otherwise also 17.9 million people are dying with cardiovascular disease anyway. So compared to 17.9 million versus 1 million death by COVID, it is an important thing because we do not know about it. It is evolving. It came in a cluster. It came in as a pandemic. But yet, the total impact on the mortality is not that high. Also, one has to understand that infection does not mean always a disease. You may be infected without a disease. So there is a good spectrum of the clinical presentation from asymptomatic to mild disease, to moderate disease, to severe disease, and to critical disease. Now, why this COVID has created so much havoc? Remember that and understand that if something or some organism always causes severe and critical disease, it is self-contained. People die of it. And the virus or bacteria and the pathogen finishes there in a shorter term. If something is causing very asymptomatic and mild infection, it perpetuates, but people are not much concerned. They get better and the herd immunity is developed fast and they're fine. But here this virus has got a complete spectrum. Some people become very critical, some are severe, some are moderate, some are asymptomatic. So it is a self-perpetuating virus. It is at the one spectrum, it is infective, it is infecting more and more people. And on the other spectrum, some people are also killed, or some people are also very critical. So this situation is a very unique situation for pandemic to enhance and progress. And when the COVID infection occurs, what happens? You can have a COVID infection in a person or a patient who is otherwise healthy as regards heart issues. There is no prior cardiovascular disease. The COVID infection in a minority of people can directly affect the heart. But more so if there is a pre-existing cardiovascular disease, then on top of this, if you have a COVID infection, then it becomes a really severe and troublesome problem. So pre-existing heart diseases and risk factors like smoking, obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and elderly people, they are at a higher risk of suffering in terms of morbidity as well as in terms of mortality when they suffer from COVID infection. In an otherwise normal person also heart can be affected, but neither it is too common nor it is too serious. So there is, all cardiologists believe right from the beginning, from the first month onwards, that there is a bidirectional interaction between CVD, cardiovascular disease, and COVID. Patients with cardiovascular risk factors and established cardiovascular disease represent a vulnerable population when suffering from COVID-19. COVID-19 itself promotes and proliferates CVD, increases sufferings and deaths. So it is a very deadly combination. And there is double whammy. On the one hand, CVD patients are not only more at risk of developing severe forms of the virus, but they may also be afraid to seek ongoing care for their hearts. So patients are worried, even if they suffer a problem like heart attack, they will tend to avoid going to the hospital. They become serious and serious more. And we have seen patients coming even 1 week later and 2 weeks later to us after having an index heart attack. So this is a double whammy. This is another trouble which we have encountered and faced. Now, how the heart can be affected? What are the ways that heart can be affected? It could be affected directly by the viral infection itself. The virus itself is injuring the heart muscle by infecting it by going inside the muscles. Then it could be indirect. As a response to viral infection, so many inflammatory chemicals and toxins are formed, and also some clot forming substances. They create multiple problems. So this is the indirect way. And then there is third way of affecting the heart is secondary. That due to widespread infection, multiple system involvement, lung injuries, lack of oxygenation in the body, all these things secondarily affect the heart. And last but not the least, secondary effect can also be because of the medications, because some medications are toxic to the heart and they can create electrical disturbances and damage to the heart muscles. And when can the heart be affected? It can be affected at the very early, at the time of infection, during the infection. That is fine. We know that somebody is suffering from an infection, he is having pneumonia, we cure the pneumonia, pneumonia goes away. So that is fine. Somebody may suffer at the time of infection, heart muscle injury, or by secondary causes, by worsening of the heart conditions, leading to more serious complications and critical state, more heart attacks in the patients who are already suffering. But the problem here is that an initial infection which goes away, the virus goes away after 2 weeks, as we all agree. But the late effects of the viral infection may continue from months to years, which affect in the form of more clot formations, more long-term effects on the linings of the small blood vessels, and that can complicate into more heart attacks, more pulmonary embolisms, what we call the clot of the lung arteries, and so many other things. So COVID-19 and CVD, the comorbidities are common in patients with COVID-19 infection. And as we know, the advancing age means more pre-existing cardiovascular disease, as well as more chances of having risk factors. So advancing age automatically becomes a milieu where the COVID-19 can affect much worse as compared to the younger people. Presence of cardiovascular disease is associated with increased mortality in COVID-19 infections. Increasing is obviously a challenge. And severe COVID-19 infection is associated with myocardial damage and cardiac arrhythmias. Antiviral drugs can cause cardiac toxicity, which also needs to be monitored and maintained and managed. And then there can be effect on the heart because of the poor oxygenation, because of the acute lung injury, acute pneumonia, leading to damage to the heart, and heart is unable to pump more. In the management part, let me tell you once again that as of now, there is not a single properly approved treatment which is directly affecting the virus. What we have is a symptomatic and supportive relief. There is only one drug approved by FDA of USA, which is the regulatory authority for drugs in US. And that is also emergency use authorization. That is remdesivir. So they have approved only as, according to their criteria, it is only approved as an ad hoc drug. It's not a clear, well-prescribed drug. WHO also clearly narrates that as of now, there is no medication directly to take care of the virus. Sometimes steroids are required when the patient's conditions are worsening, when there are a lot of chemicals or inflammatory substances are present. Patient may need anticoagulation therapy or blood thinners because there are more chances of clot formations. There are some reports now, and even FDA has approved plasma therapy again as an emergency use authorization, EUA. Means in certain cases, moderate to severe cases, plasma therapy can be given. What is plasma therapy? It is a preformed antibody. Similarly, immunoglobulins are also kind of artificially preformed antibodies, you can say. And in certain circumstances, additional use of antibiotics are required because of secondary infections, not because they are effective against virus. So this is the range and spectrum of therapies which can be at times in different varying compositions can be used in a patient. So what comes to us? Because we do not have any treatment, so what comes to us? Here the protection is the key. There's a lot of panic, a lot of hullabaloo about how to protect and what is happening. I believe that if you remember only three things, that can save you a lot. Masking, distancing, and hand hygiene. These are the three fundamental things. Keep a distance of 1 to 2 meters. So WHO says 1 meter, and some authorities say 2 meters in different countries. So at least 1 meter distancing, a clear masking, and hand hygiene. Hand hygiene is washing your hands by soap and water for minimum 20 seconds, or use an alcohol-based chemical to clean up your hands. Now, think about this, that if there is a masking of a person whom you are talking to and you are not masked, you are protected X. And if you are also masked, then you are protected double. And if you're also having distancing, then you are protected triple. So it continues, you know. So masking and distancing can have a major impact in protection of the transmission and infection of the virus. And next thing is, you may not be able to prevent transmission sometimes, but certainly you can resist the impact of the infection. You can prevent, even if the virus enters in our body, in our system, by good immunity, we can resist the multiplication of the virus. We can actually protect from the disease. So as I said earlier, infection is not equal to disease. I may be infected, but I may not suffer. So I may avoid suffering, even if I get infection, by measuring, by having all these following parameters. The good nutrition is very important. Exercise on a daily basis. And I want to draw the attention that not intense exercise. Very severe exercise does not boost immunity. Moderate intensity exercise, and especially the isometric exercising, the weight training, muscle training exercising boost your immunity much better. Clearly, smoking is much more harmful. Drinking should be very limited, if at all, if somebody is willing to drink. Adequate sleep is a good boost for immunity. So adequate sleep is highly recommended. There is no clear, I won't say this is a clear recommendation or study for this, but yes, if you maintain your vitamin levels good, then you are likely to protect yourself. Mental relaxation is very important. People are very much panicked about the infection and the economic losses. All these things we agree that happens, but a stressed system of human beings is directly related to reduced immunity. So try to be as mentally relaxed as possible. What happens to the concurrent medications? Aspirin for all is a question mark, but certainly those people who need aspirin and who are already on aspirin must have it. In other cases, we may decide it may be helpful, but there is no clear guideline on this. There was some concern about certain group of medications for blood pressure. We call them ACE inhibitors or angiotensin receptor blockers. But at the moment, there is a clear verdict that you do not need to change any of your BP medication. and they are not going to affect you adversely. There was some real concern about and some real thought about using hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine as a protection, as well as a treatment, as well as post exposure prophylaxis. But at this point of time, the authorities have all withdrawn this recommendation, and it is not recommended anymore for any part of the spectrum of COVID-related infection. There was some concern about use of routine analgesics, that they can harm if you are also having COVID infection, but that has also been refuted and not been proven. Now, there is a very interesting study which came only 2 days before, that patients who are on cholesterol medications, statins like Lipitor, Crestor, rosuvastatin, atorvastatin. So there's a study published in Lancet only 2 days before, and according to them, there is an indication that people who are on statins have more protection from COVID infection, because the statins stabilizes the cell membrane and does not allow the virus to go inside the cell. So these are all interesting facts which are coming every day. Something new, something is withdrawn, something is allowed, and something new is coming up. So known heart patients, if you are already a known heart patient, you should continue your routine medications. You do not need to change any blood pressure medication. You have to have good control of blood pressure and sugar. And the last but not the least is present to the hospital without delay when needed. Do not avoid simply because you think that there is a COVID environment, I will be exposed. Okay, you have to save yourself, but at the same time, you cannot allow yourself to suffer at home when something is really serious. So people should come to the hospital in emergencies with the same logic and same indications as they were doing in the pre-COVID times. So remember, 50% of patients with COVID infections who required critical care have known heart disease, diabetes, and other serious medical illness in the past. So the message here is that if you are already suffering from risk factors, and if you are already having a cardiovascular disease, then you have to be much more careful in protection and prevention part. Don't allow infection to occur. Besides the increased cardiovascular risk at the time of infection, the high risk may persist for many years after the infection. That is another important thing. And that association came because of the influenza infections. And we realized long before that an influenza infection can increase the risk of heart disease at the current time as well as in the future times. And obviously, pre-existing patients are highly vulnerable, and this vulnerability may increase for several years following the infection. So with this, I would just say that year 2020, we are just looking that this clock should tick very fast, faster than usual, and we come out of the calamity and the pandemic and all the panics associated with it and all the mortalities and morbidities. So dear friends, colleagues, audience, take the road to a healthy heart. Please, if you find some time and if you want some information about heart-related problems, you can visit this website, shakeheart.com. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Dr. Mittal and Dr. Maupin. What I would do is that go through some of the questions which have come. And if anyone else wants to ask, you still have a chance to type the Q&A. So I would say that, Dr. Maupin, there is a question here from Radhakrishnan Karantnath is, what do you think about Chinese government or healthcare doing differently because they were affected so drastically and they recovered from that majorly? So can we not use that practice, or is it a secret thing what they did it? How they overcome and why that example is not being used elsewhere? What's your comment on that?
Yeah. So China has been able to control the outbreak in Wuhan, as well as later when you look at whatever came back as the second wave has been very mild and it has been well managed. There are two caveats to this. One is, are we getting the correct information? Is it the way in which is reported? We know that the information we get from some of the countries are not 100% correct, and it is as the governments or the authorities want it. So that is one. The second one, it is a command economy, like command country, where you can order around people and impose things, unlike in many other places where there is a huge difficulty in imposing things. So the most important weapon, like what Dr. Mittal said, is prevention. So there is a requirement for people to adhere to that, and there is no let losing of that. And that is the reason probably they were able to control it most effectively than many other countries. And they have very strict border controls, and they make sure that people who are going out or coming in are well screened when compared to many other countries. So these two factors together, this very strong, strict control by the authorities for spread of the disease, like whatever distancing has to be or whatever close down has to happen for any sort of institutions, plus this whatever, the knowledge that we have, what's happening there. These two should be the reason for the reporting of the Chinese cases much lower when compared to many other countries.
So I think that discipline, not only from the government side, but individual discipline is also very important, how people take care of. And in China, they were able to instill that much better than maybe some of the other places. So there is another question, probably Dr. Mittal could answer that. And the question is regarding, they say that if you are in close proximity, even if you keep safe distancing, is it that the virus in the air remains for a longer time, or is it only for 30 minutes or 15 minutes? So what is the, how long does the virus remain in the air? Is there any study towards that?
Okay. So this virus has a property and a unique property. It's a very heavy virus. That is why it does not last too long, and it does not travel long distances in the air. So if there is a good distance, we believe that even if somebody is a sneeze and I am 2 meters away from him, this virus will not travel to me. It will fall down on the floor. Now the virus can survive on the floor, but then there has to be a mechanism that from that floor it reaches to another person's mucous membrane like nose, mouth, and eyes. So in general, if you look at the total conundrum of the whole situation, in most cases, if you are maintaining a distance and if you are using mask, you are done with the problem. The infectivity in other ways is extremely low and extremely rare. So we should not be worried about rare and exceptional things. We should focus more on the common thing. So common thing is, it doesn't travel long. That is a common thing.
Right, thank you. There is a question from Mr. Ankit Patel. He's talking about the use of the different type of masks. So especially when one is going into a crowd or crowded place, should they use their N95 or a normal standard mask, which is generally advised? So in a crowd, should it be N95?
No, the mask for all routine normal people when they are interacting with possibly non-COVID patients should always be a routine surgical mask. N95 is for healthcare workers, and especially when they are actually interacting with and treating the COVID positive patients, then N95 should be used. I will say it's a misuse of the availability of the N95 if you are using on a routine basis. A simple mask and distancing are good enough.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. The other question is about the use of the home. This is from Rajesh. He's talking about how effective are the home therapies like tulsi, turmeric, ginger, and other things. This is advised. That is question number one. And his second question along with that is vitamin C and D are being quite widely being consumed by people. So is it okay to consume that for a long period of time?
Okay. Vitamin D is a storage vitamin. So you cannot consume it incessantly forever and always, because it can get accumulated. It can be over the board and over the mark, and it can harm. So one should always keep checking vitamin D levels if you are taking the vitamin D therapy. And vitamin D therapy should be given only when there is deficiency of vitamin D. Unlike vitamin C, it does not store in the body. So even if you take more, it passes out in the urine and you are not getting adversely affected by it. So even if you are having enough vitamin C and you are taking more, you are not going to get harm for yourself. So you can continue taking vitamin C. It doesn't harm even if you take more, but for vitamin D, you have to take what is indicated, how much dose is indicated. Once your levels are adequate, you may have to worry and you may have to think about that you don't overuse it. Is that answer the question?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. There is one more question coming from Mr. Thangaraj Govind, is that when, let's say, and I think he's talking about when vaccine comes in, when can it be introduced to a person who is already a cardiac patient and has gone surgeries and all? So I don't know if it's a premature question or would you like to give your guidance on that?
Well, the question is not premature.
G.
It is absolutely and rather more indicated. And if you give me the injections in a very limited number, I will start from the cardiac patients. Because we already know that cardiac patients have higher vulnerability, more chances to suffer. And also I want to draw the attention of some of our audiences are also doctors, and they know that it is a class 1 indication from the authorities to give flu vaccine every year to all the cardiac patients, which we forget many times to do the practice. And I will apply the same analogy here for this vaccine. This priority should be to the vulnerable people who are the cardiac patients.
Correct. I think, thank you for that. One of the other question is this aspirin, which, you talked about aspirin, which is a blood thinner and all, and a lot of people, particularly diabetes and all those people, take it for a long period of time. Is it okay for it to be taken even by normal people for a long period of time, or it should be taken only under the prescription of the doctor on aspirin? Sorry.
I would say that it should be taken under the prescription of a physician only.
G.
We do not suggest on board for everybody usage of aspirin at the moment because it is still a medication. It can cause some unnecessary, unrequired, unanticipated bleeding problems in the gastrointestinal tract. So any medication should be weighed against the risk versus benefit. The benefit is far more in the people who are already very high risk and those who have already suffered or suffering from cardiovascular disease. The same does not apply. That benefit does not remain good and hold good for the person who has nothing and he is just like a very normal person. Then he will carry chance of more harm than the benefit. So I would still say that it is not to be used like a vitamin. One has to be careful while using aspirin.
No, got it. Thank you. The other one is a very relevant question about wearing mask for a long time, particularly in AC environment in office, or I would add to his question on a long flight, like somebody going from here to New York or, longer flights. And there, a lot of people are wearing PPEs, glasses and, the protective glasses, mask and all. And you have people sitting next to you also wearing it. So wearing it long time, does it not have a problem about lack of oxygen and all, or what one should do in such cases?
Correct. So routine standard surgical masks, which we recommend and suggest, do not have this issue. Even if you wear them for a long time, lack of oxygenation is not there. Yes, damping, collection of, dew and damping is, that can happen. And that is why our recommendation is as follows. If you are exercising, do not wear your mask, but keep a big distance and safe distance. Otherwise, don't exercise in a public place. If you are going for a walk, be away from the fellow walkers, but avoid wearing mask because a damp mask promotes more organisms, more microorganisms. So damp mask is not good. There is no need to use N95 once again, as I'm telling you. There is only need to use the routine mask. If you are sitting in your office and if you are alone, whenever you are alone, like when I practice in my clinic, so whenever in between the patient, I just remove my mask, feel fresh, take fresh air once again, and wear it as soon as somebody else comes. So you find the timings where you can avoid mask for a few minutes or few seconds or a few hours, depending on your presence, whether you're alone or you're in the group. But in general, these masks are very good, very safe. They don't harm. They only can create only some, fog and sweat, you can say. Right. And once you feel that it is quite damp, then change your mask.
Correct. Okay. I think that's a good one. Very interesting. A small question which we all have been advised to do is steam inhalation. and I myself started few days back. You know, is it good and is it worth doing? I mean, that's the question. I guess there should be a simple answer.
The answer to this question is that oral hygiene and nasopharyngeal hygiene in whatever way you can keep and you should keep. Having said that, remember and believe that coronavirus is not killed by extremes of temperature, neither by heat, nor by humidity, nor by ice. So still, if you take steam inhalation, you are only clearing up your throat. That is fine. That is good. But you are not having any actual real antidote or real direct protection from the virus. So it may be more myth. So the whole point remains that prevent the transmission. Let the infection not come to you. And if infection comes to you, boost your immunity so that infection doesn't harm you. These are the two basic fundamental points.
Right. One question comes to my mind is, you know, you talked about muscle building. I mean, I'm sure with the age and all, one can tone muscle, but younger people probably can build more. So muscle building, you know, how good is going to gym? You know, I know that they are sanitizing it and all. Still, what I found that people take out their mask there and holding machines or, you know, doing the weights and all. People are trying to sanitize it. How effective is that? Or should one try to do it at home or, you know, because muscle building generally is in gym. So
yes, true. No, there can be freehand muscle building also to start with. There are lots of yogas which do good muscle isometric exercising. So it is not necessary. Having said that, we know clearly that any kind of public interaction should be distanced and should be masked. If you are not able to wear the mask, then keep a distance. If you are not able to keep a distance, then wear a mask and get away from there. So this all sanitization can be done for the equipment. Sanitization cannot be done for the human being standing next to you. So that is his responsibility. You cannot sanitize him. You can sanitize yourself and you can sanitize the equipment. So all the precautions will remain the same. Also remember that virus does not transmit by contact. The contact is very minimal. If some recent spit from somebody leading to some virus particle on a surface and you touch it and then you take that finger to your mouth or nose. So remember, these are the steps. Then only you will get infected by the virus. So we have to have the right information. The virus travels with a close proximity from one person's sneeze or cough droplets to another person. This is the most simplistic way. If you think more about it in different ways, somebody said from the shoes. Yes, it can be from the shoes. But what are you going to do with the shoe? How the shoe infected with virus that virus is going to reach to your eyes and ear or nose in the mucous membrane? There has to be a mechanism.
Correct.
If we focus on the common things, once again I'm saying, focus on common things. Simple surgical mask, distancing, finish. Hand hygiene.
Excellent. There is one question on typical on the heart, matters of heart, but health one.
Yes.
In this case, the gentleman says that, good evening, doctor. I had passed the TMT in December, but by end of January, a month later, I had chest pain. So what his question is that, and then angiogram followed and stents happened. So is TMT can detect perfectly, or one should do more tests together with TMT that will indicate whether you are in risk?
Okay. So he's a bit lucky that he didn't suffer the next day. We have had patients who had absolutely normal treadmill and they came back 24 hours later with a heart attack. Now, how it happens? Treadmill only detects short blood supply to the heart muscle on exercising if your blockages are more than 70 to 80%.
Right.
If there are minor blockages, which we always tell to each and every patient of mine, maybe Dilipji, I also told you, that a normal treadmill today only tells me that today your blood supply to the heart muscle is good. It does not guarantee that you may not suffer a heart attack tomorrow. Why? Because heart attack occurs when even a minor blockage ruptures like a volcano, creates a clot, and clogs the artery and prevents the blood flow. That is how the heart attack occurs. So the pathophysiology of heart attack is different. That is why many times you will see that good athletes, while they are doing exercising, and at the end of it, and they are exercising every day, and once suddenly they come with a heart attack. while exercising. Right. So it happens because they were not having any major blockage. They were just exercising. And then suddenly they come with a heart attack. Why? Because they were not having any major blockage. They were just exercising. So it happens because they were not having any major blockage. They were just exercising. And then suddenly they come with a heart attack. Why? Because they were not having any major blockage. but the minor blockage converted into a heart attack, which is very much possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dr. Mopin, there is one question I would put it to you. It's by Mrs. Jaya Mahalingam. She asks, will herd immunity, ever become a reality, or does it apply in case of COVID-19? What would you say, Dr. Mopin?
Yeah, definitely. Herd immunity is something which we are all hopeful that gradually, as been told, the number of people who are actually infected and number of people who have the disease are very much different. So large number of people are already infected and they have the antibodies in their system, but they haven't shown any symptoms, or they are not known as COVID patients to us unless and until we test them. So it is building up. In any country where this has been for a pretty long time, you will find that the herd immunity increases. But only when it crosses to 60 to 70%, you will have a protection. So can we wait for that? Can we allow the people to get infected? Even though we are not allowing now, it is getting infected. And so we are sure that at some point of time, there will be sufficient herd immunity. But here there is one caveat which I want to say, like in influenza, our worry is that this virus can have genetic mutation every year or more frequently, and it can change. So even if you get a sort of an antibody, it's not a definite protection, because there could be a change in the genetic composition of the virus. So maybe later there's a risk of you getting the same with a varied genetic composition. So, but herd immunity is something which even some countries tried for that, but now it is not being tried, but definitely. Now, another way in which herd immunity can come in is through immunization. The level of antibodies will go up when we start immunization, and there will be more of people protected. So it's not required that everybody has to be immunized. When it goes beyond a level, there will be a level of protection being given even by that herd immunity.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Mopin, there is a very simple question, but I think very useful, by Wasi Khan. My question is about masks. Which are more effective, disposable ones or reusable ones? Because reusable ones are coming in, a lot of designer ones, and a lot of people are using now. Yeah. So 3-layer and 6-layer and all that. So
sure. So see, there is nothing wrong in using the disposable mask if it is being properly sanitized. So if it is being used, and it has got an advantage also. When you look at the disposable mask, it is actually adding to the environmental pollution and plastics. So there is an issue there when you are using this so rampantly, both the gloves as well as the mask. Whereas if you have a good quality cloth mask which can be used, it may be a good thing. The surgeons' masks and all, many times it is cloth is the base material for that. So I feel that there is definitely nothing preventing us from using cloth, and if it is properly sanitized and if it is sure that it's not infected and used by another person, ideally by same person using the same mask, that will be a good situation.
Okay, thank you. I know that we are 1 minute above this, but in interest of the health, I would just, a very simple question I want to put. You know, the gloves, wearing gloves while going out to gym or other places, a lot of people say gloves should only be worn by the medical healthcare people. What would you advise? Should people use gloves, plastic gloves, while going to gym or such places? Not on a regular basis. What would you say?
What would you advise? Brajesh, you would like?
Yes. So again, this is a very interesting part of the total picture. The gloves are, I think, not needed for everybody. Hand hygiene is far more important. Wash your hands frequently, so that even if you touch the virus from some surface, you kill the virus and you don't take. The other part of it is not only wash, avoid putting your fingers and your hand unless you have washed them properly towards your eyes and nose and mouth, so that you don't take the virus inside your organs, which take the virus in. But routine plastic, that is not of feasibility or value.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we are up on time and questions also. So Dr. Mopin and Dr. Brajesh Mittal, you know, this has been a great session, very informative for everybody, all of us included, members, guests, and everyone. So thank you very much for coming. And Dr. Mittal, thank you for organizing this. And for the members, that he's also convener of Education, Healthcare and Social Infrastructure Focus Group within IBPC. So, and it's a joint initiative of Sheikh Foundation and IBPC. So, you know, so thanks to all the members and guests who have come on line today on this. I'm sure it has been a lot beneficial to everybody. So thank you again, Dr. Mittal and Dr. Mopin. Thank you for organizing and thank you for being part of it. Namaste.
Thank you, Dilip Sinha ji, and also the chairman, Suresh Kumar ji. So thank you all the IBPC members. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
sir, for coming over.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilip ji. Thank you, sir, for coming over. Thank you so much. Thank you, my colleagues and audience who all attended this. Have a great evening. Thank you.